Hey folks, it's been a little while since the last author diary. I have been stuck into the editing process, as well as trying to wrangle all the various components of Dreams of Fire, which is at this point a lot of illustrations, and working with the artists and just trying to get all my ducks in a row. There's a lot of moving parts on this thing, more so than with the last book I published. But since one of the selling points or supposed unique aspects of this book is that it is illustrated, I thought I'm probably overdue at this point to talk about things that I've learned in the general process of working with artists and working with illustrators. Now, as with everything, this is going to be fairly unstructured. This is going to be based off my experience, things that I've kind of picked up along the way and gotten a handle on. But it's going to vary from person to person depending on what you're doing. And that's the first thing. Know exactly what you're commissioning and why you're commissioning it. And that may sound like duh, but it's not hard to find yourself like coming across artists you're like, oh, I bet they could draw my character really well, and just like trying to commission them for a portrait that you don't even know what it's going to be used for. So the first thing is actually finding artists. Most of mine I've actually found through Twitter. And here's the fun thing. A lot of them I came across because they retweet each other's stuff. So I would find one artist who, maybe their art style would suit me, maybe it didn't, but then they'd retweet somebody else and be like, oh, hello. I should probably explain, I have at this point 3 primary illustrators for the work that is going to appear in the book. I am working with additional illustrators as well, but some of that is for things that are going to be rewards for the Kickstarter backers. So there's a few things that you should know going in. The first is you need to look at their commission prices and be prepared to pay what they're asking. Don't insult an artist by making them an offer when they have commission rates. Now, if you think you like what they do and they don't have commission rates up, ask. And some of them will say, is there a budget you're trying to work within? And then, give a realistic projection of what that budget is so that they can figure out whether or not they can work within it. But for the most part, find their commission rates for different pieces, and most artists will break down commission rates based on a couple of things. The level of detail and coloring sophistication of the finished product, how many characters are involved, whether or not there's a background. There's a lot of variables that can add additional expense. So most of them will start at, I'll do you a line sketch, and then there's going to be, up from that, there's going to be flat color. Some will vary by how much of something they have to draw. Someone who primarily gets commissioned for drawing character portraits, they might charge different for a bust versus a full body image, and things like that. Again, find out what their commission rates are and be prepared to pay what they are asking. Don't haggle, it's insulting. Here's something you need to be sure that you ask, because thankfully I didn't fail to ask this. It was something I caught early on, but it is something that you need to keep in the back of your mind. Ask them if there is an additional fee for a commercial license if you are commissioning anything that is going to in some way generate revenue for you. What I mean by that is when you commission an artist to do a piece of art for you, even if it's your original character that they are composing a piece about, that piece of art you own, but unless you have an agreement with them, you are not allowed to make money off that. You can't reproduce it and sell it as merch. You can't stick it in a book and sell that book unless you have a commercial license agreement. Most artists charge an additional fee if you intend to use their work commercially. Some will inquire about residuals or royalties. I personally, just for myself and knowing what I am capable of keeping track of, I always opt for a flat fee. And if they're not prepared to go with one, honestly, I'll probably go with another artist, because trying to keep track of royalties basically indefinitely into the future is not something I feel equipped to do. Just being realistic about me. Maybe you are. There are some people like who are good with spreadsheets and updates and like all that stuff. I'm just like, I'm not. I can do it. I'm not incapable of it, but I ain't good at it, and I hate doing it. So if I can avoid it, I will. But you need to be sure you find out what their commercial license fee is and make sure that you pay it. And that's the other thing. Make sure they know the intention behind what you're doing, because some artists may be more or less comfortable with their art being used in specific ways. Now, the reason behind that will vary from artist to artist, and it may depend on what it is you ask to have them draw, but be sure that you are not leaving them in the dark in terms of A, the project that it is for, and B, the fact that you intend to make money off it, if that is in fact the case, which obviously it is for me. Now, another thing, something that it would have behooved me to do early on, but I didn't, would have been to commission an artist early on to do character reference sheets. Character reference sheets are basically taking your character in what would be their standard garb and, noting things like height, weight, showing them from the front, in profile, from behind, and basically it just serves as something that you can then provide to any other artist you're having commission the same character and say, this is the character you're working with. Now, let's be clear, a reference sheet is not the same as a style guide, because ideally any artist you commission is going to do the character in their own style, but it still gives them something to come back to. And if you don't have a reference sheet, then there's probably going to be a lot more back and forth, or at least potentially between you and the artist in terms of fine-tuning the look to get what you want. So let's talk a little bit about the actual process. Generally, what you're going to get back first, after you've agreed on prices and commercial license and everything else, and also, by and large, be prepared to, most artists will have you pay half of the total commission up front and half on completion. That's pretty standard. Some work differently, but I found that to be by far the most common. So when you get to work with them, you need to be prepared to describe in pretty heavy detail what it is you want. Now that means the character, what the character looks like, their age, every detail that you can think of that matters. Hair color, eye color, skin tone, a description of clothing, including colors. If you want a background, be prepared to describe that. If you're having them draw an actual scene in action, be prepared to describe poses and things like that. In my case, I've actually had a few instances where the artist sent me some initial sketches, give me something like this, and let's be very clear, I can't draw, and so I sent them this horrible doodle from me simply to make clear the angle and character positions that I had in my head, which in that particular case the artist actually took great amusement from and did still find them helpful. But I've had other instances where I've actually taken photos of myself holding poses or from the angle that I wanted something to be done from, because I only have so much faith in my ability to describe a pose, and since I can't draw myself, using myself as a photo reference, it helped in a couple of cases, actually. Another thing that you'll find is that you may be comfortable, and this may vary from case to case, giving the artist a fair amount of freedom in terms of designing things for you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just be cautious about that, because the less things you specify for them, the more things you leave for them to decide for themselves, is potentially the more things you're going to have to fine-tune and tweak, which I don't want to say it's a waste of anybody's time, but it is going to make the process take longer than it's really necessary. So try and have as clear a picture as you possibly can of the characters, of what they're doing, of the setting, and of the angle you want it viewed from. And I think that's something that some authors don't always think of. For me, that's not a big problem because I tend to, even though I wrote a novel, I tend to think in terms of film anyway. So I picture camera angles and everything else like that. So the other thing is be sure to ask, and most artists will be very upfront with you about what the turnaround time is. There is no standard turnaround time. Different artists have different turnaround times depending on how many commissions they are usually dealing with at the same time, what their actual drawing process is, because some do things that take longer. Some start with sketches on paper and then refine it digitally. And I have one artist that actually does the color by hand as opposed to doing it all digital. And those take a little longer, but I knew that going in. Whereas I've had other artists who do almost everything digital and they have a very quick turnaround, both of which are fine. One is not inherently superior to the other, but you need to know how long should you expect things to take. And then depending on your own time frame for your project, you may want to consider lining up more than one artist, which is actually what I've done. As I said, I have at this point 3 illustrators for the images that are going to be appearing in the book proper. I started out with just one, who I liked very much. I say liked. It's not past tense. I still do. I'm still going to be using a lot of their art. But what ended up happening was that they actually got a book deal to work on their own thing, and that obviously took priority over me commissioning a half-page illustration every month or so, which was about the pace I was going at. This was before I even ran the Kickstarter. Obviously, they didn't have the time to make me a priority anymore. And again, if artists, anyone who's any good is going to be very honest with you about what their restrictions and their complicating factors are. And if something changes, they will reach out to you. I've actually had 2, maybe even 3 instances of artists who I reached out to and contacted who it seemed like things were going to be okay going forward, but who then had something go on in their life that made them unsure they were going to be able to deliver. And they made me aware of that, and I made the decision to go look elsewhere. I still would have liked to have used them, and maybe in the future I'll still have that chance, but they'll tell you. And it is okay to check in if you've gone past the point when you thought you were going to get a finished piece back, or even a sketch back. Like if they've fallen behind, it's okay to touch base. Just do so politely. Realize there's probably stuff going on. They may be swamped. There may be any number of things going on. But so coming back to the initial process, you're going to get a sketch in the first place. And the sketch is usually going to be mostly about the broad strokes, the position, the shape, the angles, things like that. And then you'll usually get a rough pass on the color. And oftentimes this is just sort of showing you the general, well, this bit will be more or less this color, this bit will be more or less this color, and it'll be worked out in much more detail and shaded and sort of given more vibrancy when it's done finalized. But that's to make sure that you're happy with all the colors before things start getting done firmly. Now, if you work with an artist who works physically on paper, once they ink the sketch, you really can't change that anymore. So you need to be sure that you've got everything locked down there. If you're working with someone who works completely digitally, it's easier to tweak things at a later stage, though that's still something you really should avoid doing. You want to be sure you do as many tweaks as is possible at the sketch phase and at the early color stage so that they're not having to rework what was supposed to be a finished piece, because it happens sometimes, but it's frustrating for them. So I think that's a lot. Oh, I suppose related to this, I have also gotten, separate from illustrations of characters and scenes for the book, I have gotten a world map and a city map done for the book as well. Now, while I found my illustrators for the book through Twitter, both of the maps I found through the site Fiverr, which I've used before for a number of things. I've actually gone to Fiverr to get designs for most of my merch. Like the concepts for the merch are all mine, but I'm not a designer. I'm not a graphic artist. I'm not a logo designer. I don't trust my ability to do that. So I would take the concept to Fiverr and they would show me and finalize and things like that. So things like my merch, actually my outro music that I use at the end of the videos, and you'll hear when the credits roll, I commissioned that through Fiverr. I actually find it to be an incredibly helpful site in terms of finding people for one-off gigs. So that was where I found my world map and my city map artists. And again, be sure you ask about a commercial license fee, because in both cases that was in addition to what the normal cost that they have for their work was. And again, know that's going to happen. I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, the main resources I used was just bouncing around Twitter to find out who took commissions and had them open. And like that needs to be your opening question. If you reach out to an artist through something like Twitter, are you currently accepting commissions? That should be your first question. Don't immediately launch at them with a description of the project and the characters. Like, find out if they're even available before you shoot all that at them. And then I've found Fiverr to be a fantastic resource over the years. So between those, I've gotten on top of what I've needed to. At least I hope I have. I've still got a lot of work to do. I've still got more editing to do. I've got more illustrations to commission, and it's a process, but it's moving forward. I was overdue to give you folks an update and some of the things I've been going through, so I hope you found that interesting or helpful or something. I don't know. Take care of yourself. Be well. Be safe. And be kind. I have the usual stuff. Like, share, subscribe, Patreon. All that's helpful, but you also don't have to. Try and take a relaxed attitude around here. So just come on back next time you need a break.